All right, welcome to Dev Diary 74. We're going to be talking about gene modding templates today. And templates in general is something that has been under some scrutiny when it comes to Solaris. There's a lot of systems in place where templating is definitely something that could be useful. However, it's not really in the game. And I'm kind of hoping that this particular Dev Diary or this system is going to put some groundwork in when it comes to templating in the future, and specifically I'm referring to fleet building in this particular case. Regardless, we're going to be talking about gene modding templates today. Basically, there was been a bunch of complaints towards the developers regarding the difficulty of recognizing which types of individual species there are in your empire when they are gene modded. So for instance, you have humans and various types of humans. You couldn't really change the name for them and putting in different categories. This is now going to change due to a new categorization system based around the gene modding system. So for instance, if you have for instance a human species and you want to make a subspecies based on that, you will create a subdirectory rather than a new core species. So then you will have the ability to turn multiple categories below it, which makes a little bit more sense, you know, when it comes to subspecies. How this is going to work when it comes to creating entirely new species is a whole different question, but it's still an interesting potential there. So how is this going to work? Well, first of all, they're going to be adding the template system where you can, for instance, generate a template for a species. You create a certain amount of traits that you want. You know how much it's going to cost. You create that template and then apply those templates to a series of worlds that have species on them. So this is a really interesting system to deal with this. And templating in general, I really feel, like I mentioned, is... in this particular case, it feels like groundwork for a upcoming fleet builder or a fleet designer or something along those lines, where a system that is very, very desperately needed within the context of the game gonna be introduced at some point, hopefully before 2.0, before that actually hits and before the next big expansion anyway. In addition, the individual cost for changing a species has increased. The base price for uplifting or changing the genetically modifying a pop has been increased. However, the individual cost for a pop has decreased. So how it usually works is you pay a flat fee of, say, 500, and for every pop you would pay 2 or 3. This has now been decreased, or at least it has been, the base has now been increased to, say, as an example, to 1,000, but the individual pop price has maybe decreased to 0.5. The whole point of this is that the total cost when it comes to uplifting, or at least genetically engineering a species, it becomes more interesting with larger groups, basically. So just genetically engineering 1 or 2 planets is not going to be nearly as interesting as completely changing the genetic engineering for, say, a larger population, like several planets at once or something along those lines. What the numbers there are going to be is a whole different question. Final numbers are not final, etc. Also, a cost for swapping out pop habitability traits, which is basically what kind of planet they can live on, has been added, but this only applies to the base cost of the genetic engineering system. Previously, there was no base cost involved when it came to changing the habitability trait, apparently. I never really noticed it myself, but it's still something interesting that you need to keep in the back of your mind. So that's actually kind of interesting. So seeing templating being added to the game, but an easier way to manage your species from a biological level is going to be added in Chopek, which is really, really cool, to say the least, to see these incremental updates in coming up. Also, some traits had their costs and effects rebalanced, so we're going to see different changes in the effects of some of the genetic traits for anybody that goes for the biological ascension perks. This could be interesting for you to evaluate. The costs as well have been changed, so who knows what's going to be there. We'll need to take a proper look at that once the patch notes for 1.7 come out, or 1.8, my apologies. Also, the advanced traits for biological ascension, which is erudite, I believe, as well as nerve staple and a bunch of like the super breeding ability, etc., have been actually been reduced in cost. So you'll be more easily be able to get these high-end abilities and basically spec out your species to crazy levels. There's no word whether or not you can still have only a maximum of 5 genetic perks, so that is something that is still up for debate, so we will see. In all, these changes should serve to make Gmodding a much more intuitive and user-friendly experience and give you a much easier way to organize and categorize the different species within your empire. So this, all in all, this feels like an incremental update towards Utopia, obviously with biological ascension, which is a big part when it comes to these genetic engineering cycles. So yeah, it's good to see that we're at least getting some sort of support still for some of these expansions. Of course, if you don't have Utopia, you still have access to a lot of the genetic engineering stuff. You just don't have access to the biological ascension perk, which gives you a slew of points to spend on genetic engineering. So anyway, next week they're going to be talking about why the author Chapek was chosen for 1.8. Yeah, so probably robots. I would not be surprised if we are going to be seeing technological hive minds. The Gestalt consciousness is coming. Until next time, take good care of yourselves and, of course, each other.